Hey, what's up guys? What I want to do in this video is kind of elaborate a little bit more on finances and some of the things that you could do to protect yourself. I've made a previous video where I talked a little bit about spending during your residency or once you start making a salary. It's a common thing to want to, buy cars, buy houses, whatever it is you've been depriving yourself of over the last 8 years, which for most of us is everything. Um, However, there's a couple of things you should get when you start residency to give yourself protection against catastrophic failure of any sort. So, the number one thing is an own occupation disability policy. You'll have to go through some kind of broker for this or some kind of agent. It's not something you can really get on your own, but the own occupation disability policy is extremely important. Um, why? Because you'll be offered disability policies through your residency program, most likely, but these disability policies will be short term, maybe 6 weeks, and even the long term ones will likely not be own occupation. What that means essentially is that if I can't do my job as a physician, I get paid. With a lot of other disability policies, they will tell you you could do some other kind of work. So let's say, and I'll use a real example, someone I actually know who was a very good cardiothoracic surgeon making roughly $500,000 a year, very talented guy. He decides to go get LASIK surgery, right, on his eyes because his vision was starting to get a little worse and he didn't really want to go through the glasses and contacts thing. So he's going to opt for LASIK surgery. Seems pretty reasonable, relatively safe procedure. And it turns out that after the procedure, he was one of the few people who had worse vision when he came out. He actually had basically become legally blind at that point, and he was no longer able to do his job as a surgeon. Obviously, you need to have good vision to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. And in the end, his disability policy actually, told him that he could go do something else. He could go teach, he could go do some other kind of work in academics or research or pharmaceutical industry, and that he was still, and so they refused to pay, is the moral of the story, because he didn't fit and he didn't have this own occupation clause. Now there's some other ones in there too, and I can elaborate on those further in a video dedicated towards disability policies and disability insurance and what I think you should get and what other clauses you should have in that disability policy that will allow you a little bit of flexibility. But for most residents, it's relatively cheap, number one at this point, because you're young and you're healthy. So that helps a lot, right? Being young and healthy, you might not even have to go under medical underwriting, meaning you won't have to take a physical exam, blood test, urine tests, etc. If you do, you'll have to do quite a bit of things. They'll make you do, basic physical, blood pressure, height, weight, and then they'll go through a process of looking at they'll look at your blood, they'll look at your lipid profile, they will test for HIV, they'll test for things like opioids or cocaine, marijuana in the urine. They'll test the urine, basic UA, nothing crazy. And a couple of other basic laboratory results. They'll look at liver function tests and things like that. However, so it's pretty comprehensive and you got to go through it. If you have any issues, now you may have a problem because now you're not going to be an ideal candidate if you have any kind of underlying illness. But in most cases, most people are less than 30 years old going into residency or around or in their early 30s, let's say, at which point you're pretty healthy and certain insurance companies will probably allow you to forego that process. So that's, a really excellent thing, number one. So that would be my first recommendation for protecting yourself and protecting this, 200 or 300,000 or $500,000 investment in your brain and investment in your ability to work. Because everything you've worked for so far is really kind of based on your ability to continue doing your job. So if you can't do your job for any reason, that could be a major issue. So that would be my first suggestion. Second thing is if you have education debt, which most people do, unless they were lucky enough to have it queued up for them or whatever, or they had some kind of funding, trust fund or something, who knows, I don't really know, but most of us have education debt because we had to take student loans. So if you have education debt, and if you're married or you have a family, you have kids, you are going to want term life insurance. And you should just look for the lowest cost policy. And there's certain places you could go to look up agents, and you'll get phone calls from those agents directly offering you policies. So you want to look for something that's, going to give you about $500,000. I mean, people will tell you should get $1 million or $2 million, but as a resident, you're probably not going to want to add that monthly payment to your, salary. It's going to hurt you. But around, I would say somewhere between $30 and $40 a month, you can have a $500,000 policy, and that should cover your education debt and whatever else in the event of your death. Again, you have this huge investment in your brain and your ability to work. If you die, you can't work. And now the education debt, unlike a lot of other debts, is not cleared with your death. So it will fall on the responsibility of, a spouse, let's say. So you don't want to do that to those people. If you're single, if you're not married, you don't have kids, then maybe you can, skate by without this policy or with a lower policy. But again, it's something you might want to lock in when you're young because you're healthy, you're young, and you get a better rate, and you also fall into, a better category where you may not have to undergo any kind of medical underwriting. So that would be the second thing I would do. That would be my second most important thing. It's not as important as the disability. Disability is number one because if you can't work, you can't make money, you can't pay for your, you can't pay for your stuff. Now, the third thing I would do is just be aware of what your car insurance, like the liability you have on it, and how, some of these companies have like really cut rate policies that are very cheap, but they don't cover a lot. And with this, I'll tell you, if you're in an accident, your fault, the other person's fault, who knows what the case is, but let's just say it's your fault, you got in an accident, something happened, and, you tell the person, hey, I'm a resident physician at blah, blah, blah hospital. Okay. Well, automatically in the average person's mind, resident physician just means you have money. Although that's highly unlikely, you probably don't have any money, you're probably a negative net worth at this point. The point is that people are going to think you have a lot of money. And if they think that, they're going to be more likely to sue you. I'm not saying this is all cases, I'm not saying everybody's a douchebag, but it's possible. And if they are truly injured or something like that in the accident, then they have a right to do that, I believe. I mean, it's like there's a difference, obviously, between people looking to make a fast buck on somebody who they think has money, or they're truly legitimately hurt in the accident. So we'll make that distinction. I don't want to sound like I'm just saying people fake it all the time. But the next thing is to just look that policy over, make sure you have decent car insurance, because if you're driving, if you have to get to the locations, drive to your hospitals, whatever, you got to be careful. And if people know you're a physician, they may be more inclined to try to sue you because, again, doctor equals money, although that's untrue, and not the reality for actually a lot of physicians, even attendings. It's still something that people have in their mind. So just be aware. I'll leave you with those three things. I think those are the three most important things to protecting your assets, to protecting your investment in yourself, in your brain, and your ability to work. So if you like the videos, please subscribe. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments section.